All right, we are live. I got a really special guest today, a guy I could probably spend, 3 hours on the phone with, but we've already spent about 45 on the phone talking because, you just kind of get geeking out on some stuff and people would really be shocked what we geek out on. But I'm super excited today. I want to thank everyone in the studio. I want to thank everyone at kvar.com. I want to thank all the sponsors. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate everyone, and I appreciate the one and only Mike the Cop for taking the time.
I'm super stoked to be here, man.
Bro,
Thank you for having me.
this is fucking awesome. I'm really jacked up to have you on. You definitely crack me up. I've watched your videos for so long, your stuff. You are one of the originals. I'm going to give you the award if no one else will. You are hands down one of the originals. You started the whole genre of,
Another way to say I'm old, I think.
I know, right? Isn't that brutal? I get that too. It's like we're getting there though. But you were definitely hands down one of the originals. Do you feel like an original?
I feel like maybe I'm behind Officer Daniels a little bit when it comes to OG cop stuff because he's the one that inspired me. But it's been 6 years since I did my first stuff online, so it's been in internet years. I'm pretty much should be dead by now. That's about it.
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean, Officer Daniels is no doubt, but I feel like you came and compounded it. You definitely 10x'd it. There's no question. And I think you just have
too kind.
No, I think you just have some really cool stuff. So how did it all get started and what are some of the origins? I know you touched on Officer Daniels, but how did it all come to be? And it's kind of, serendipitous how it's played out, but how did it all get here?
Well, everybody typically will remember the Michael Brown shooting in Ferguson. And when that happened, I was on vacation at the time and I was watching how the news was covering the story, right? So I see this false perception after false perception and just ignorance, and all damaging to police officers for really all the wrong reasons. And I just remember sitting there thinking, man, I want to do something about that. About how do I battle perceptions in the media? And since I don't work for a network, social media was it, and I wasn't even a real big social media guy. I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna do something about this, and I started to put myself out there a little bit more on social media. And the whole goal was simply to help change perceptions of law enforcement to be more accurate to reality than what people often get. So started that, and that just led to some relationships, particularly with a lady named Tristy, who was working on a blog, and that led to Humanizing the Badge. And we just kind of went to work making posts online and growing Humanizing the Badge, and ultimately turned that into a nonprofit and growing from there. And we eventually realized, well, we've got to continue to grow attention to what we're doing. And I was like, well, this Officer Daniels guy that my kids introduced me to seems to be killing it with video. If I do something with video, maybe that'll help draw attention to what we're doing. And then I did my first one, and I woke up the next morning and it had gone viral, and it's just kind of I hadn't looked back since.
Yeah, it's crazy how that happens, and you have that starstruck, I guess, star-crossed moment is the best way to put it. And you wake up the next day, nothing really changes, right, Mike? But you just kind of
right.
What's going on here? Why does my phone have 9,000 notifications?
Right.
So you definitely carved out a really cool niche, whatever you want to call it. And I feel like, a lot of people like to pay homage to those before you. I always like to say Steve Colston was the original magazine cover guy and all that jazz.
Uh-huh.
And then, in the firearms business, then I came along and started doing a lot of marketing, and there were guys before me doing it. But I think what you've done is you had a purpose and you had a little bit of a focus, and that's maybe through Humanizing the Badge and some of your messaging. What does it mean to you to create the proper message? Because that's always been something people come back to. You do it right. What has that meant to you, and why is that so important?
Now, I think it's true in life, not just that. Probably in our content is if you if you don't have a real clear why of what you're doing, it's super easy to get distracted and lose not only momentum, but lose your way. And then all of a sudden you end up in a place down the road. You're like, how did I get here? This isn't what I set out to do, or not what I envisioned. And so to me, it was just more important to kind of keep the bearings and what is true north for what I'm doing. And for me, that's always just been I want to be in that sweet spot where law enforcement meets culture. And when I do, I want to educate people who need educating, and I want to, entertain people who, could be won over by that means. And if I can do both of those things in that sweet spot, and then I feel like I'm getting a big win.
Yeah, and I think that's a lost art, right? It's community policing at its finest in so many ways. But do you feel departments underappreciate it?
Oh man, I big time. I mean, it's great now to see how many cops are like engaging on social media and trying to do their part, and I think it's awesome. I still think sort of like the old guard is mostly around when it comes to police departments and how they view or engage on social media. So it's frustrating at times, but I think especially over the next decade when people who are, like my age become the administration, then I think we'll see some pretty drastic changes with how departments engage in social media. But a lot of them are very, very far behind the times and don't understand it.
Right. I mean, before we get to the scary side of that, I think that there's also, there's so many good folks out there trying to put some great messaging out there. Like, I talk endlessly with Mike Cunahan, No Donuts here. And Mike, he's just trying to get cops in shape and get them fit. And he suffers through nightmares to try and make that happen. And it's something that there's just an insane disconnect. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's just going to take time, administration, certain things, pieces to fall into place. But it's crazy how, that fear of not knowing holds them back from any type of change, right? Like, it's just so crazy to me.
Yeah. Yep. So, sometimes it comes down to like, if you're in that position of quote unquote leadership, you're valuing the position more than leveraging the position for what you really believe in. And they kind of want to protect themselves, even if they don't necessarily disagree with how social media could be used. They sort of say, you know what, it's better for the next guy to deal with that, not me. I'm going to play it safe, instead of risking a little bit.
Right. And I mean, it's something that's not going to change overnight. We all know that, but it's nice to see guys like yourself. And I know Mike has a mission, certain folks out there, but there's also a dark side to it too, right? Anytime you have access to social media, you see people abuse it and they set the mission back, right? And how often do you see that? I mean, are you a guy who's like, please, like, stop taking your clothes off on? So, I mean, where do you stand in all this?
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. I see it on both sides to where, I mean, I don't, whatever. I don't begrudge anybody that wants to put their true selves out on social media. Sometimes it goes in another direction where you're kind of like, man, is this about law enforcement and culture, or is this just about you? Is this just about a social media following? I mean, I've seen guys like come in and, they have a video that makes the news or something, and then all of a sudden they have a management and it's they're trying to do sponsorships and everything else, and it's kind of like, what was the real motivation behind this? And I think it's going to be that way probably in any industry with any group of people. You're going to have people that come along that are in it for themselves, and I mean, there's no escaping that. Even in first responder world, there's still going to be people who are douchebags, at the end of the day, that come in and try to do stuff online.
And I'm going to come out and say it, Mike. I think it's been a little bit of failure on fellow Leos to not call certain people out. And I've said this before, whether it's in the jiu-jitsu community, somebody has to step up and police it and be like, no, you're setting us back. Like, what are you doing? And I know that's always hard. Everybody always says, do you, but they don't realize that they could be creating long-term ramifications.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And hopefully I'm not one of the people that shies away from just calling it like I see it when I see it. And, I have a long history of not giving a shit what people think about me. So I don't usually shy away from saying, hey, this is stupid or this is great, whatever my real opinion is at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where social media goes with law enforcement, but I think at some point it's going to become a hot button issue in that transfer of power that you're talking about over time. But what you've done is something that's unique and something that's exciting. And whether it's through humanizing the badge, some of the nonprofit stuff, some of the videos, I feel, it's just my belief, that you've taken community policing to a whole nother level. And that's where I think the win is, Mike.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. I hope so. I hope that that's had an impact. If that's the case, then that's a cool legacy to leave behind.
I think, yeah, and I think that's the real story. I think at the end of the day, and what I've seen, and I could be wrong, I think by putting some of your thoughts out there, yeah, there's an inherent risk when you blog or you put stuff out there, but you're human too, right? So you want to put some of those thoughts out there and just say, hey, here's how I see it. You know, when I pull somebody over that's doing 175 miles an hour, they're not just a danger to themselves, they're a danger to the community, and they're breaking the law. So I think, you know, right, laying some of those things out, some of those basic constructs, and having people understand where you're coming from is a huge piece.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I love seeing some of the thoughts and just some of the things that you put out there. Now, all this stuff happens. You talked about, you know, having that, what I call viral moment, and everything kind of hits. Are you in the weeds at that point? Like, what do I do now? What's the next steps? Where do I go from here? Are you getting hauled into the chief's office? How does it play out after that?
Well, I mean, I was really fortunate because before I ever made my first video, so like I had started a blog, it's called Cop Life, back in like, I think April of 2014. So then I had put something out there to give back to the law enforcement community, and I didn't think that was just for me personally. It wasn't even meant to be far and wide. I was just sharing it on my personal Facebook page. I was no social media accounts whatsoever other than just that. And when we started humanizing the badge, then my police department at the time had kind of watched me do that nonprofit work and sort of like be grinding and using my off time to invest into that. And so when it came time for me to make a video, I reviewed our social media policy, and I just sent an email to the administration and basically said, hey, here's what I want to do. I want to make sort of some like this humorous content to draw attention to what we're doing. And I don't want it to be negative stuff. I want it to be positive about law enforcement. And they just gave me a lot of slack in the line, I think only because they had seen what I had been doing for, you know, like
right,
a year and a half before my first video that I put out. Then it was kind of like, well, yeah, we trust you, and so have at it. And if we have a problem, we'll bring it up. And, you know, we just never really had a problem because I tried to color in the lines as far as work goes. I mean, I'm sure there was a few times that they weren't super stoked about what I said or how I said it. But, you know, at the end of the day, I had sort of earned that relational equity with my department, a little bit of trust there. So it's not all officers are as fortunate to have that decent relationship with their admin, but I happen to, and so that was good.
So when it all starts to come together and you have that positive relationship, and I don't want to say like the blessing, because you and I both know you never get the blessing, right? You get kind of like a,
yeah,
okay, like, you know, we'll watch this. You start moving forward with some of these initiatives and some of these things. Did you ever imagine in your mind, you know, having all these videos hit 1 million views and having this stuff, you know, happen the way that it has?
No, I really didn't. And there's no universe that exists in which I would ever pretend to say I knew what I was doing. So once I figured out the formula,
right,
I just kept applying it, and I knew where this would go. So I don't have any any special tactics. I was just like, hey man, I'm gonna be myself and keep making content that I believe in, and with the eye to both entertain and educate. Like I want to engage the audience that's willing to listen, and I'll just do it for as long as I can. You know, like I'll just keep doing it, and never put myself in a position to where, you know, I depended on that audience, you know, to like me or dislike me. I just said, like, I'm just going to keep doing this because it's what I believe in. And when it's done, it's done. And until it's done, you know, I feel like God's given me the platform. I better use it.
At what point did your family start to look at you weird? You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Like where they're like, I'm starting to see your videos pop up. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, no, like, you know, I have a niece at school. Like, eventually it was like, hey, send a picture of like FaceTime me or send me a picture so they know that you're really my uncle, or whatever. Like, what? Like that kind of stuff, like where it started to happen like that. But, I think my family is fairly used to it at this point, but I've always been like, my personality in my life has always been, I would say, insane. I do crazy things. I try crazy things. And so this was another one of those that just happened to stick around, but they're used to it and kind of like, that's the way it is.
Yeah, I always like to ask that question sometimes because there's always that aha moment where you say, I really have something here, and something, kind of starts to take shape. And, that's exciting. I mean, you have to kind of pinch yourself. It's not an attention thing so much as it is, you're just kind of like, okay, now I need to harness this. And most of us behind the scenes start spending time talking about, okay, how do we make money on it now? How do you transfer this into revenue at this point?
Yeah, for sure.
But that's what people don't realize is you spend a majority of the time trying to figure out, okay, how does this become capitalized on? Now, I want to touch on, you have some insanely popular videos. Okay. Some of them being any firearms in the vehicle today, cops coming for your guns, some of the confiscation videos. And I want to, is that a topic that is, kind of big with you?
Yeah, for sure. Second Amendment stuff has just been one of those issues. Again, a lot of my content has come from just what I see people responding to in my videos. Like I'll mention a topic or do a video that sort of like hit me, a topic that hit me. And when I see the response or the engagement with it, I'm like, wow, I like this topic. It's something that I'm interested in. And apparently my audience is too. And so I just do more of that because I feel like I'm honoring them with that content. So I'm like, I wouldn't describe myself as a super like gun nut, but the I don't know, the Constitution is really, really important to me, I think. And I also do enjoy training and shooting and that sort of aspect of things. So it's a real natural fit. And, obviously every cop carries a gun, so it reaches the police world and those that often in the Second Amendment community really think cops are against them. And so I thought like, man, this is a great opportunity to educate and engage people with. So I love that sort of topical concept.
Yeah. I think talking about some of those hot button issues is really important to push out there. And I wonder, your thoughts on some of the gun confiscation stuff, how you feel about it very candidly, and how you feel about maybe things going on in Virginia, what you see out there and cops being put in that position to confiscate guns.
Well, I think my personal belief is that any gun law is wrong. Pretty much that's how I believe. The only things that I have ever done as a police officer with guns, and I've been in law enforcement for coming up on 11 years now, and the only guns I've ever confiscated are from people who use them to commit a crime. That's when I take your gun. Like you robbed a store or, you shot a person. Yeah. You don't get to keep the gun right now. That's it. And I think that's a pretty fair approach as far as law enforcement goes. I'm totally anti red flag laws in the sense of where they're going. Like I feel like certainly if someone has been mentally adjudicated as like they're genuinely schizophrenic or prone to violence, like we need to. I think there's a conversation to be had about that. But I mean, as far as my part, I don't think any of these red flag laws are sensible. And I like what I'm seeing from some of the sheriffs in Virginia stepping up and saying, hey, well, I'll just deputize every single person in my county that wants to be deputized and they can carry guns wherever they want. Standing up against that sort of tyrannical mindset.
Yeah, I think it's insanely scary. I spent some time talking to Jason. We met the number one guy at Isla, and we chatted for a bit on some of that. And it's just, I feel like they're creating an impossible narrative for law enforcement. And that's one of the things we talked about. It's a tall task to ask a police force, hey, we want you to go kick in the doors of every citizen and take their guns. I mean, that's absolutely insane to me that they would put, active law enforcement in that position, because it's an impossible position to be in. You cannot win, and you would never do it. I'll say it for you. You would never do it. It's impossible.
Right. It'd be really hard. I could see I feel like they chip away. We see in California, right? Like the culmination of some of these decades of chipping away at gun rights in California, where it starts, if you can't take away the gun, you regulate the ammo, right? you start chipping away at something that at first doesn't seem that bad, but then, you get there and you look up and you're like, how did we get here? And it wouldn't surprise me if there are efforts from politicians to circumvent the current structure of law enforcement and, let's say, appoint a new police force, right? Governors could work that. Legislatures could work that to where they just bypass the current law enforcement structures and create new ones to where maybe it would appeal to someone that would want to, that's anti-gun, to go take guns, but still it's a tall order to sign people up for a job that says, hey, we want you to go to all these houses that are known to have firearms and we want you to take them. I mean, it's tantamount to essentially begging for civil war. And it just seems, the direction of anti-gun is really, really popular politically right now because I think it's expedient, like so many other issues. And at the end of the day, it's a super tall order and would create more problems than ultimately I think politicians want.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think it's one of those situations that's just going to create a lot of angst. And I think for the most part, you have to. The mistake I feel, and I've said this being from Massachusetts, being from Boston, I said this to some friends of mine and family members that were recently in town in Nevada. And they're close to the governor, and I coach the governor's kids in football in Massachusetts, so I know them there. I said, what you'd really like to see in a perfect world is first put a panel together of not just gun store owners, but maybe advocates in the area, folks that are passionate about it, and hear them out first. Understand the laws.
Right.
Because one of the things I brought up to a very close friend of mine, I said, and they're in between, they have a liberal side to them, but they're usually, to the right of the center. But I said, how in the world does an attorney general, Maura Healey, arbitrarily have the right to produce a list, basically create a law that says you can't have these guns because I put them on a list and I deemed it so? And that's enforceable by who and enforceable by what? And I said, you don't understand. It's not about safety at that point. Don't tell me it's about safety at that point. It's about an agenda, and it's about a political bully pulpit that they want to create, and they want to use it as a stepping stone to bigger and better things, maybe running for another office and whatever. And we allow them to do it. And I said, it's preposterous. Right. And this is someone who used to be, part of the governor's, cadre. And I said, it's insane to me that, Charlie allows that to it just happens. Like he just allows it to that's what we'll let it be. I said, it's insane to me. And I said, it's insane
I think
that they create
so much
that.
of there's so many issues this, I think, plays with, and that is allowing our comforts to creep in and make us complacent to issues that matter. Right. So like, I see it across the board culturally right now is when you turn on the news, like what people are being quote unquote victimized by is like, it's literally we're making stuff up to be victims of or offended by because we really are not uncomfortable as a people, right? Like there's no immediate threat. You want to talk about the 1940s when people were like, bombing our country and we had to go to work to defend that. We rallied behind a cause because our very way of life is being threatened. And now we're just in a place of comfort. And it's kind of like people are like, 10 round mag, 30 round mag. What does it matter? I have an iPhone and I have a latte. What does it matter? I'm really, nobody's really coming to my house to break in and steal my shit. So 10, 30, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like these little bits of pieces of complacency are really costing us our freedoms. And we have to people who are aware of that have to be obviously pretty vocal about it and have those conversations.
The question is now, Mike, how do we fix it?
I think it's time, it's facts, and it's leveraging the mediums that we have. So we have to be willing to invest the time in it. We can't just expect there is no 1 day solution. There's no 1 year solution. it's a commitment over time, and we have to make it based on reality. We can't play into the feelings trump facts sort of mindset. We don't even play that game. That's a different field. Just continue to produce content that is truthful and leverage those mediums. Every social media platform is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to communicate truth over time to people that needs to be conveyed. And I think like the more people are committed to that over time and engaging on those platforms in productive ways, not just name slinging, not just meme making that's anti something, but consistently dripping that content over time, hopefully will have an impact as the pendulum naturally swings back. You know, like these stupid laws in New York that are giving the criminals the resources to know the names, addresses, and phone numbers of their victims so that they can continue to harass them after the fact. Like that pendulum is going to swing. Some politician's kid is going to get beat up or killed, and then all of a sudden it's going to be important. But if you're there filling in the gap, promoting why this is asinine for months and years going into it, when people are exposed to your content, they're like, oh, this is refreshing. This is what we should be listening to, you know, because this makes sense. So hopefully you're just ready for when that pendulum starts swinging back the other side by necessity, and you've been there the whole time.
Do you feel like we're on the precipice with that, with things like Turning Point and some of the other initiatives?
I feel like they're filling in the gaps really, really well. I don't think we've reached the point to where there's a crisis moment yet in culture. I don't think we're there yet. I still think it's going to get worse before it gets better, like culturally speaking, with people being absolute morons and completely disconnected from factual observations. So I think there's still a battle to be had.
Do you prescribe to the theory that it originates in some of the colleges?
I think that's definitely one of the avenues for sure. It is an avenue where I think leftism, I won't even say liberalism, like in the classic sense, because I think in a classical sense, liberals and conservatives agree on a lot of things. But I'll talk about leftism as an ideology. It certainly seems to me to have more of a foothold inside academics than we probably wish it did. And I say that from someone who has spoken at, you know, criminal justice events or groups on college campuses. And it's quite honestly pretty discouraging to sit down and I'm not being very welcomed in my viewpoint as a law enforcement officer for criminal justice students who are spending their time on nothing but theory and have no real world application to compare it to.
Now, somebody asked the question on Podbean, you know, what do you say about safety of kids in the schools? It's kind of hard to answer that without knowing specifically what they mean. Right.
But as far as, laws versus not laws, I mean, I would say that the more we rely on the government to supply our solutions, the less secure we will be. So I would say that every school and that community, the parents and the community of that school, needs to decide what's best for them and how they want to keep their kids secure. I'm of the persuasion that my kids are my responsibility, not the schools. So I teach my kids how to defend themselves, how to conduct themselves, and how to react to things. I don't put that on anybody else. So I think as a community, we need to come together to decide what's best for us. And certain solutions in certain contexts may work and not work in others. And that's why I think like the more locally we can think about those solutions, the better. But I'm all for any variety of both preventative and offensive measures to make our schools hard targets.
Yeah, I think here's how I put it, Mike, and I definitely, you know, would defer to your thoughts and be interested in your opinion. I try to put facts around it. So whenever I'm looking up something while I'm on a call with somebody, I try to put perspective. So in 2019, according to what I'm looking at right now, and I always like to get as up to the date facts, and people can look this up. It's an education week, which I assume is, like you said, as left as you can get or as liberal as you can get. It's an educationweek.org. You can just check it out. Here's behind the numbers. There was 25 school shootings with injuries or death in 2019. 51 people were killed or injured in school shootings. 51 people killed or injured in a school shooting, 8 killed. 43 injured, 5 students or other children killed, 3 were adult employees or employees of the school. Here's the thing, and this is the perspective I try to give people. When you put that number up, 51, up against the total number of shootings in 2019, and you'd have to back out, and we can get into that whole debate, the idea of what we call murder-suicide, right? You back that out because that's not really, they're not hurting anyone other than themselves, and a lot of those are mentally ill people or people that were going to kill themselves one way or the other. They just chose to use a gun. Sure. So I don't think it's fair to leave that in. I don't think that's a fair number. So 51 deaths. In 2019, according to Gifford's Law, when you start to break down statistics, and there's a number of places you can get these numbers from, 36,000 Americans were killed with guns in some way, shape, or form. But 22,000 of them are gun suicides, or 61%. So when you start to back that out, and you start to back those numbers out, it's a very, very small number. Now, to the listener's question, they put a little more context on it. They said they should be focusing on their education instead of worrying about whether or not they're going to get killed. I agree, 100%. And I think Mike does too. I don't want to speak for him. I'm going to give it to him in a second. But I also think that there has to be school resource officers in every school. And there's no reason why there can't be. And there's no reason why there shouldn't be. What are your thoughts?
I'm totally down for school resource officers. I think there's tremendous value that goes way beyond just immediate protection from an immediate threat that for school resource officers. So I just kind of like throw that out there, but that kind of turns into a separate conversation. But as far as, I agree with you 100%, right? Like 51 compared to, the last numbers I looked at was 17,000 homicides a year in this country. So you're right. Like comparatively, we've got bigger problems, and that's not, and the problem is that when emotions come involved, you're like, so you're saying kids don't matter. Absolutely not saying that. What I am saying is that, where can we have the biggest impact to reduce that number? Where can we actually do something? And a lot of times what happens is and this is a tactic used by the left, is you ignore problems that are big because they're too complex or they contradict your ideology. So you have to attach yourself to something that you feel like is immediately fixable and apply your principles only to that and not broadly. So point in case being, especially with gun laws or thinking about school violence, they all take place illegally. They all take place in no firearms zone. When you look at places with the strictest gun laws, have these massive homicide rates. So we could address that, but we don't, because it wouldn't match the narrative. It wouldn't match the ideology. And it's a big problem to address. And so instead we turn to something that's seemingly less complex, and we can apply our ideology, at least in a very narrow way. And we think that's proving a point. And I think we do a disservice to the kids and otherwise, because the employment of the idea of kids should be thinking about their education, not fearing for their lives. Yeah, I agree. But think about how many kids are taken advantage of. Like they're literally sexually taken advantage of in this country, sexually molested or attacked in this country. When you look at that number, I can say the same thing. Kids should be focused on enjoying time in life, not worried about whether they're going to be sexualized. That's a true statement. But there's a way bigger problem with that in this country than there is with school violence. That's just fact, right? So, what about people who their houses are broken into, home invasion? Many more people have their home invaded than are impacted by shootings. So we could also say, man, kids should be able to focus on resting at night, not whether their house is going to get broken into. it becomes nonsensical when you frame the argument in terms of emotion rather than objective fact, like you're bringing out. So, like, yeah, those things are true. It is preferred that a kid could have a good night's sleep without fearing that their house is going to get broken into by someone who would have nefarious intent. But that does happen still. But to frame it that way is to make the likelihood of that seem worse than it actually is. And so it distracts us from things that we should actually be focused on fixing at the heart of it, rather than, these surface level arguments or catchphrases that seem to match the narrative.
And I agree wholeheartedly. They followed up with, why don't they put more school resource officers and why don't they have metal detectors? And I'll answer that in my context. It becomes a political hot potato, right? Instead of solving the problem at the point of attack, and I believe, a good plan executed now is better than a great plan later. Putting in things like metal detectors and putting in things like school resource officers, you get towns, and I know you know what I'm talking about, Mike, and some of these small towns and some of these boards of chiefs, they start saying, well, who's going to pay for it? And they get into all this horse trading. And that's where the breakdown and a lot of the failure occurs. And I try to explain that to people. It's not a money thing. They have the money. These are towns that'll spend $30,000 on independent audits, but they can't justify spending X on something that makes all the sense in the world. It's a no-brainer, but they get into these horse trades, and these horse trades are where we lose the battles. It all becomes about a trade. For years and years and years, we've wanted national reciprocity. When will we get it? When we're probably willing to horse trade for biometric handguns or whatever, what have you. What I want to take a step back to take a step forward on is what I try to explain to folks is the reason I gave the statistic of 51 in 2019 is there were probably 51,000 news articles or videos about those 51 deaths. Now, I'm no way minimizing that, but we spend too much time emphasizing a very, very, very finite amount. It's like ARs. Anybody who has half a brain, Mike, and I'll say this with you on the line, knows a majority of deaths occur with handguns, but we obsess over ARs. And it's because of the sensationalism and it's because of what goes on in the media with it.
That's a great example of exactly what I'm talking about, where you can't address the real problem with violence that's happening with handguns. So you create a scapegoat that fits your ideology and can use another tactic from a very narrow perspective and try to sway people that way. And it just doesn't work. It's a weak leveraging point. And at some point it's going to break because, it's impossible to reason that way, but that's the way that people are trying to make sense of the world, is through these narrow fields of vision with only things that agree with them and making everything mutually exclusive. Right. So it's kind of like you just said, only 51 deaths compared to any other number of things that we could talk about that causes death or dismemberment. And so you're saying kids don't matter? Nope, that's not what I'm saying. But we live in this world of mutual exclusivity, right? There's like this cognitive dissonance that happens in which everything is tribal and everything has to be pitted against another, rather than just taking an honest look objectively and looking at the cause of something and then addressing that, whether it's simple or not.
Yeah, and if you take a real look at it, like the AR-15 debate, okay? And I looked up the statistic, and if you get really deep into it, that number is insanely small. And it's
ridiculous. It's like less than 4% of all gun deaths involve a rifle or a long gun of any kind or something. It's ridiculously low. Yeah, don't quote me on the number. You can look it up, but it's low.
There's a bunch of competing statistics, and I'll tell people why. It's because a lot of times some stuff just gets classified. They're getting better at it. It gets classified as a gun death. And a lot of times they don't know how to classify a long gun versus, you know how it goes. There's a different jargon that goes on with each thing. I mean, did they use a musket? Did they use, all of a sudden now everything's an AR-15. So it's hard to really boil it down. But when
because crime reporting for a long time, I mean, to my knowledge, like if I arrest somebody right now that shot someone with a shotgun, it's going to be included in the report and the evidence, but the crime, there's no such thing as homicide with shotgun as a crime, right? It's just homicide. those numbers are difficult to track because the crime is homicide. The crime isn't having a shotgun. So it's like trying to gather information from reports is a long, tedious process, and they're having to reverse engineer a lot of this to kind of like try to gather data.
Yeah, Nine Line News did a really good breakdown of it, if anyone ever gets a chance to look at it, where they break down that there were more murders with hammers and clubs
Yes.
from 2018 on, and it's a really interesting read if anyone gets the opportunity. I believe it's on Nine Line News. It is on Nine Line News, but I believe the title of it is a meltdown over FBI stats. I'm trying to look it up, but I believe that they broke it down to where the hammers and clubs caused more deaths than rifles.
Yes, exactly. But that's where facts get you, and that's why they don't want to focus on that. So they want to appeal. They want to appeal to emotions and not intellect for political expediency.
Correct. And the real
I'm not fooled by. I do think there are probably some people that are on the far left side that are truly so ignorant they actually believe they believe their own nonsense. But I believe that you look at the presidential candidate field right now, every single one of them doesn't believe a word that's coming out of their mouths about guns. I don't believe it. I believe that they know the truth and they just use the popular narrative for themselves. They're just trying to gain a position of power and influence for themselves. And I don't think they believe a word that's coming out of their own mouth.
And a lot of that comes back to my point that I made earlier, which was I would love to see a candidate or anybody in a major office take a moment to sit down and say, we put a panel together and here was what was discussed, and put it out there. I mean, it's 2020, Mike. 2020, Mike. Put it out there and talk openly about here's what we came back with. You're going to find more often than not, most gun owners are very, very good citizens, law-abiding citizens. They have squeaky clean records. They pay their tickets. They are very respectful. They're very open and honest. When you pull over a good citizen who's a gun owner, how great of a stop is that?
It's awesome. In fact, if I pull over somebody who says like, "Oh, I'm carrying concealed," like just letting you know, I'm like, or if they say, "Hey, I have my CPL," like if it shows that, but I'm not carrying. I usually like, "Why aren't you carrying? Are you crazy? Like, what if you need it?" Like now you want to have it. I'm encouraging gun ownership.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's one of those situations that, I feel we could go on about forever, but I think it's all about context and it's all about perspective. And that's why I like giving the data, and that's why I like feeding people some of the information that's out there. And I think it comes back to your point earlier, which is educate yourself, get some education around it, spend some time looking at the data yourself, and then form an opinion.
Yep.
So
if people would take a small bit of time to think for themselves. And that's true of like the perception of law enforcement officers too. Like just sort of like buying the perceptions that the media has fed over the years or just reputations over the years. And you just kind of like inherit these ideas without thinking about them for yourself. And that can go a long, long way when people pause just for a few moments to really think without just buying what people are selling.
How much does it bother you, the perception of law enforcement today?
I sleep the same at night. I mean, it's still like it's what drives me, right? It's like why I keep doing what I'm doing, because I think it's valuable. But I don't let it get to me in a way that it just like eats me up or anything like that. I mean, it's frustrating for sure. But the reality is that on a day-to-day level, where you're encountering people that you're working with. So when I'm on patrol, 99 out of 100 people I'm going to meet are going to be just fine with me, and I'm going to be just fine with them. The perception is just like those deaths in school shootings, right? It's magnified. We give it this massive amount of traction. We almost glorify it. We almost create these self-fulfilling prophecies. And now the next shooter is like, that's where I want to do. That's how I'm going to get my notoriety. That's how my face is going to be on the news. That's how I'm going to be going out, how I'm going to be remembered. We glorify it almost. And the same thing happens with the law enforcement perception. Like, we blow these circumstances up in the media, and it's just not the day-to-day experience of people on the ground, officers or citizens. Like, it's just not. Most of the time, it's completely fine. And that's what I see. And I think that if I wasn't still active, as an officer, I could lose sight of that. But I mean, when I get in the car and engage with people, it becomes evident to me all over again that for the most part, it is just perception. I mean, and I think the battle is important because sometimes perception is all you have until you have an encounter with law enforcement. So if I can help change that before someone's encounter with law enforcement, I think I'm making us safer and just a more productive, as a profession.
I can't agree more. I think you're absolutely correct. And I think it really is disheartening in many ways to see the narrative get pushed out there and see some of the things that do end up in the news, because I feel, and I felt this for a long time. I mean, it's not a mystery. I always make it a point to go down to any free law enforcement training or anything guys are putting on, try to get behind it. But my big thing is, there's not enough training. There's not enough time spent, getting guys boots on the ground and spending enough time on the range, in the gym, getting enough education, getting enough, you guys are undermanned to begin with. And then to see a narrative pushed out there the way that it is, after saying what you just said, which is so accurate, by and large, the experience is a good one. But we're so quick to publish, if it bleeds, it leads. Am I right in saying that?
No, that's completely accurate. And I look back and at first I thought, when I kind of got into this world of social media, that this was a new thing, but I started looking back at how certain things were covered in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Now, I mean, now news is more opinion than ever. When you turn on the quote unquote news, there is a bias built into it on both sides now, but there was a little bit more objectivity before, but still, you sensationalize the rare. And when you sensationalize the rare for long enough, in the minds of people, the rare becomes the norm. And I don't think that that's super valuable to people who, think that objectivity is super important. So, and I think that a lot of people aren't intentionally trying to think incorrectly, but the water we're swimming in certainly pushes us that way. That's the current of culture. And I think we just have to swim against the stream.
Yeah, it's going to take time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. What discourages you the most? What does keep you up at night with law enforcement? That we're not going to attract good enough candidates to have a strong law enforcement presence, in the next generation. That too many people who are considering a career in this weigh it out, and they look and they say, I was just in Tennessee and I went to a police academy graduation for Chattanooga Police. And I got to say, I was very impressed by the department, very impressed with my conversations with the chief. So this is not meant to disparage them in any way. The chief is not the one that decides the city budget, but they start at like $35,000 a year and they top out in 4 years at $51,000 a year. Yeah. You can't make a living on that.
And it's kind of like, you're already, if you're down there and considering that career, you're already committing to making almost nothing. Like how do you raise a family of 3 or 4 kids on $40,000 a year? How do you do that? Let alone, now I'm going to go in here and I'm sort of be vilified by the media, and it's this situation where a lot of people that I'm going to come in contact with only have those perceptions, and it's, I'm putting my life on the line for all this. And at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. So I feel like police work is something that has to come from the gut. Like you really have to want to do it. And it's got to be a fire in your belly. Like it has to be one of those careers where like, I've got to do this. I have to do this. And if you don't have that, I think you're already not performing optimally as an officer, but, just looking at the kind of candidates that you're going to attract to this career right now in the current climate is not that great, So that's something that bothers me, like how are we going to make sure that we're attracting those people with fire in the belly that are willing to do the hard work over the next generation of keeping this career what it should be.
Yeah, it's one of those situations that it comes back to the question again, how do you fix it? Where's the fix in it all? Is it something that has to be dealt with nationally? Is it something that has to be dealt with locally? Is it something that has to filter down from the top? Where does the fix come in? And that's the tough part, right, Mike?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, not a lot of people realize how political policing can be, as far as, a chief of police is appointed, right? And who appoints them? Well, a city council, a mayor, or, city administrator, that kind of a thing. So they're sort of like not completely or entirely at the mercy of politicians, but it's crazy the sort of like impact that politics can have on policing, or sheriffs are very often elected officials. So it's kind of like, it's tough when it comes to the solution to that, because at the top, it comes down to sometimes political wins, and that's unfortunate. And I wish there was a solution to that, which maybe there are solutions to that, to sort of like disconnect, policing from the politics. Would be great if that could be done entirely. I doubt it, but that'd be good. And it'd be good to see leadership from like chiefs or sheriffs down being the chief or sheriff of their department, and not championing, politics, and standing behind their guys and being a leader that leads out of strong influence, and not just swinging their position around, I guess.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It becomes a political hot potato like many other things, and it becomes a difficult fix. And it's something that I think there has to be a deep dive, in some of these towns, and you go into some of these sleepy towns. I mean, they're making, I spent some time in Franklin, New Hampshire. I have a lot of friends that are cops up there, and those guys, they're making 35, 40 grand a year, and there's not a lot of overtime. There's not a lot of ways to skin the cat. There's like 1 square mile in the town. So, how do you piece it together, because it comes down to piecing the income together. How do you do it? And then they get butthurt, the departments, when you have an outside job, or, you want to put something together that, involves you doing outside work. And that's always been, a huge issue and a boondoggle for folks, because doing anything outside of the department, you're demonized.
Yep. It's tough. There's a lot of cops are in those tough positions right now.
So it's becomes one of those things. Do you think at all at times law enforcement officers, they go too far trying to capitalize on being a cop?
In terms of what? How would you see that
on
playing
social
out?
media, or in contextually, trying to glamorize it in a way that they're in it for themselves, like we talked about earlier? Are there moments or instances where you've seen that and you're like, it goes from being a side hustle to they're in the car creating, all kinds of videos, stuff like that? Does that ever bother you?
I think it only bothers me when it comes off, when I feel like I can see through it and be like, yeah, this person is just really about themselves, and it's really not about the job. It's not about, principles or ideas or something like that. But it really is about simply growing themselves. And again, I would never begrudge anybody that goes out and tries to create something and earn something for themselves and that kind of thing. But yeah, when I see that, it's definitely like, it can bother me. And I've had direct conversations with cops. Like I've unfollowed cops, and they've reached out afterwards and be like, well, what, did you unfollow me? Like, yeah. And I've had very direct conversations with them about here's why, because I'm not going to be, when people see me and they look at who I'm following, that matters to me. Like I'm not going to lend my support to somebody that I believe is doing damage to the reputation of law enforcement versus helping it. What
advice do you give to folks trying to get into that game and trying to build something maybe like you've built, or Officer Dan? Like what'll be a few pieces of advice you'd give someone?
I would say, long before you ever try to connect your profession of law enforcement to social media in a public way, do the job, have a good reputation in your community, in the track record of your career, and have a good reputation among your coworkers and your leadership. That makes all the difference in the world. It's not worth sacrificing that for a little bit of, time in the spotlight or whatever. Like your career is important. This profession is important. And, so many times, like I'll talk to police academies and stuff like that. And I can't wait to sort of like do what you do, however they would phrase that. And my advice to them is like, you know what, man, like it takes in this career 2-3 years until you sort of get your bearings, you get your feet wet, you get acclimated, and you actually make a difference and do something. Focus on that first. Don't come off and do this persona that, I'm about the community, or I'm about this, that, or the other thing. Go do it. Do it first, then talk about it. But if you haven't done it, if you haven't put the time in, then no one's going to believe it anyway. They might believe it for a little bit of time, but when push comes to shove, when they look at your career and your actions, are they going to find it? Did you really do it? And that's I guess any advice I would have is like, by all means, be on social media, but if you're going to make it about the career, the profession, then make sure you put the time in. You sort of like paid the dues to be able to have a voice.
Has anyone ever taken your advice and you've seen sharp turnaround, or you ever have to adjust someone?
I hope so. I don't really do a lot of like consults for social media and stuff like that, but I mean, I've definitely seen people like that registers, like, yeah, that makes sense. And, and I've seen a few people that don't heed that advice, and, and you can watch, it's very predictable what happens to them. Like, even if something seems to catch, it fizzles out because, they don't have anything to say because they haven't done it. Valuable information comes from people who've been sort of like in the arena,
Right.
that's what matters. And if you haven't been, then people will quickly see you for what it is, which is, just a lot of talk.
Yeah. And I think that there's an allowed for honeymoon period, right? Where I think some people are figuring it out, and I think that they're allowed to figure it out. But at the same time, there's a little bit of that, like, okay, the honeymoon's over. Where are we? And I think people need to kind of understand that. And that's always a hard part. And that goes on in social media for every profession, every space out there. I think that there's good and bad in all things. And, you don't have to go far to find the bad. And I'm trying to choose my words carefully because I'm all for everybody trying to figure it out, right? But we don't give people a lot of grace, but that grace period's only so big, right? I think that's where we both can agree. I think you're allowed so much grace, but, don't push the envelope to a point of no return. And then, right. Mike the cop unfollows you.
Yeah, there you go.
But I think, everybody's allowed a little bit of like that figuring it out period. And sometimes you need a little mentoring and you need a little push, and you kind of sort it out and you say, geez, maybe I need a little course correction here. Everybody's been there. I've been there. We've all been there. It's just figuring it out and getting it right and being like, okay, maybe I was doing that, but I'm not now. And I want to get this right. So, it's one of those things, man, we could go on forever. This is, amazing. I definitely want to, you to let everybody know where they can find you. I know you have a ton of stuff going on. You have podcasts coming up, different things. Let everybody know where they can find you, how they can reach you, and what the best avenue to reach you is.
So MikeTheCop.tv is the site. Anything major going on. If you're interested in becoming a cop, you'll see so you want to be a cop at the very top of that, explore that. I'm helping people take those steps in their career, but MikeTheCop.tv is it. And then if you pretty much go on any platform and just look for Mike the Cop, you'll find me. My usernames can vary from place to place, but usually Mike the Cop will get you there. But MikeTheCop.tv is the main hub for everything, and certainly when I launch the podcast.
And what are you plugging right now? What are you promoting?
Just that right now. I do have I don't know how many law enforcement officers or people you have in the audience that are looking for the benefits of CBD, which has been huge for me without THC, because you can't piss hot. And so check out CBDOps.com. It's my newest venture, and we're grinding away and loving it. And the results that people are getting are awesome. So that's been like probably my biggest project that I've been working on lately.
Yeah, I think that there's something there, and I've started using it, in jiu-jitsu, and I love a lot of the different rubs and the different what they call like their version of BioFreeze and infused with the CBD. I definitely think there's something there, and there's no doubt that it has huge therapeutic effects. I'd love to see it just across the board, and I think that it is, Mike. I think it's losing its demonization, if you will. CBD has a place. There's no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a whole huge world, but I think it's a great conversation even for like the gun community too. Like, do you want to have a self-defense shooting situation in which you get blood work done as part of that investigation or whatever else is going on, and you've got a ton of THC in your system? I believe in the freedom for people to kind of put what they want in their bodies. That's my personal take, but it can have an impact. So that's why I think the THC-free part is really important to us, to make sure that we're offering something with some benefits that doesn't have that.
Yeah, no doubt. And the best way to reach you?
Mike at MikeTheCop.tv is my email. So if somebody wants to reach out directly with any other questions or follow-ups to this conversation or anything else, we can reach out anytime. And
what's the best way to slide into your DM effectively?
Just catch me on the day that I actually look at the pending messages. I try to get through the answer to everybody, but the worst way is to say, hey, can I ask you a question? Like, I'd rather you just ask the question, because then I can answer it. But if I have to say like, yes, it's okay to ask me a question, then I have to wait for you to send me a question. It just gets too much. I can't keep up. So if you want to slide into the DM to the question or something like that, hey, come out swinging. Just ask it.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. Just come right out with it. I appreciate you, man. I can't thank you enough for taking the time. It means a lot getting your thoughts.
No, it means a lot that you would ask me to be on here. I sincerely appreciate it. It's awesome.
No, man, listen, I've always admired you from afar, and that's not lip service. I think that you have a really unique perspective on things, a fresh perspective, and I think that more people should adopt it, and I think that what you're doing is really amazing.
I love it, man. I look forward to connecting with you and on and off audio and camera over the coming months, man. It'll be great.
Anytime, brother. I'm here. I'm not that exciting. My days aren't that super great, but anytime. And I appreciate you taking the time. And I hope everybody takes a minute to listen to this, because Mike has some really great thoughts on a lot of different things. I can't thank you enough. I can't thank everyone in the studio enough. Everyone at kvar.com. I want to thank all the sponsors. I know we'll have show notes on this. This has been really amazing. Mike, you always have the platform after you get everything else up and running. I know you're working on some stuff behind the scenes. I'd love to have you back on, and I don't offer that to everyone, but it'd be really great to get you back at some point. And go check out all Mike's content. It's really awesome and refreshing. He's got a great perspective, and I think him humanizing the badge and creating the narrative he is out there for law enforcement, I think he's taking community policing to another level. I appreciate it.